Okay, so let's get into this. We often think creating is, the making part, the writing, the coding, whatever it is.
Right, and then maybe you hit publish, and that's it. Job done.
Exactly. But the moment you put it out there, that's really just the start of a whole new phase, isn't it? And it can be pretty challenging.
Absolutely. That's when your work starts, living its own life,
Mm,
interacting with people, or sometimes dealing with zero reaction at all. It's a
yeah.
huge part of the whole creative thing.
And it can really change how you feel, right? About the work itself, about making more stuff even. So what we're digging into today, it comes from these notes, some excerpts, really exploring that exact dynamic, navigating what happens after you share.
hmm And these notes, they really try to pull out the core insights, the things that help you understand all these external pressures, praise, criticism, silence, while somehow staying grounded in why you started creating in the first place.
Yeah, that's the goal here. Pull out the key stuff so you, the listener, can figure out how to handle it. We're going to look at what really drives us, the pull of needing validation from others, dealing with negative comments.
Which is inevitable.
Totally. And also, what about silence? That can be brutal.
Yeah.
And even the flip side, what happens if something goes viral? How do you actually balance putting yourself out there with, well, how people react? It's about building that creative resilience.
It really is. Understanding that the reaction is, well, it's data, maybe,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily your map.
Okay, let's start with something really foundational that the source material highlights right away. Understanding motivation. It talks about intrinsic versus extrinsic.
Right. Intrinsic motivation, the way these notes frame it, is that like deep internal reason, the actual enjoyment of doing it, the curiosity that makes you want to explore something, the personal satisfaction you get from figuring things out or getting better. You do it because the act itself feels meaningful.
And extrinsic, well, that's all the outside stuff.
Exactly. Likes, shares, comments, yeah. Money,
Uh-huh.
awards, praise, all that. Now, the notes aren't saying these things are inherently bad,
Right, getting a nice comment feels good.
of course,
Yeah.
but they give a pretty serious warning about relying on them too much. What's really interesting is how the source talks about the danger of linking your kind of dopamine response directly to those numbers. It sets up this loop
Ah, yeah.
that can lead really quickly to feeling burnt out or overwhelmed, trying to chase what's popular now, or just being terrified the numbers will drop, that fear of losing momentum.
So the main takeaway here seems to be, look, external results are a bonus, maybe, but a really healthy, sustainable creative life, that has to be built on that intrinsic purpose, that internal why.
Precisely. If you lose that internal anchor, chasing the external stuff just becomes this endless, fragile pursuit.
Which leads perfectly into what the source calls the trap of validation. I mean, let's be honest, we all like being liked, right? It feels validating when people connect with what you poured yourself into.
It really does. And that feeling, that's part of the trap. The source describes this really common cycle. You make something that feels, authentic and meaningful. You share it. It gets some positive attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then, maybe without even realizing it, you start subtly shifting.
Yeah.
You start thinking about the next thing or even tweaking this one based on getting that same reaction again.
That's the slippery slope, isn't it? That tiny shift from making it because you need to making it for the clicks or the claps.
Yeah, the notes put it really well.
Yeah.
You might stop exploring those weird little alleys that genuinely excite you personally.
Mm.
You start avoiding risks, or you hesitate to evolve your style because you're afraid you won't get that same level of external approval.
Yeah.
And this is where this idea of creative integrity comes in, as the source defines it.
Which is?
Basically, this commitment to doing the work you feel called to do, even if nobody's paying attention, especially if nobody's paying attention. That internal compass is your guide, not the applause meter.
Okay, but practically speaking, when you put work out there, you open yourself up to opinions, and they aren't all going to be helpful or kind. The source material gives some practical advice on handling the negative stuff, right?
It does. And it acknowledges, look, feedback comes in all flavors. Some is genuinely constructive. Some is just emotional venting or entitlement or someone projecting their own stuff onto your work. The key, according to this material, is having a plan, a strategy, so it doesn't completely knock you off course.
So what does it suggest? What's the plan?
Well, first step, sounds simple, but it's crucial. Just pause. Don't hit reply instantly. Give yourself some breathing room, some emotional distance.
Right. Don't feed the trolls or your own immediate reaction.
Exactly. Second, try to filter it. Ask yourself, okay, is this comment specific? Is there anything in here I can actually use? And maybe is it delivered with any shred of respect? even if it's critical.
So you're not just absorbing everything like a sponge, you're actively deciding what gets in.
Precisely. Also, think about the source. Who is this person? Do they actually understand the context of your work? Do they have any credibility in this area? And maybe the biggest point the source makes, this is so important, you have to work on detaching your sense of self, your worth as a person, from how your work is received. You are not your bad review.
That separation is vital. And I remember that line in the notes, it really jumped out at me. Critics who've never created often underestimate the difficulty of creation.
Yeah. That's a good reminder, isn't it? It's easy to critique from the sidelines, but
Yeah.
the vulnerability, the sheer effort involved in making something from nothing and then sharing it. The source suggests that remembering that gap in experience can sometimes help you process criticism that feels, well, unfair or uninformed.
Okay, let's shift gears to something maybe even harder for a lot of creators. Silence, just nothing. What do the notes say about facing that?
Silence.
Yeah.
For most people creating stuff, that's probably way more common than huge praise or intense backlash. You put your heart into something, you share it. And so,
Yeah. No likes, maybe few views, your friends don't say anything. It can feel like you're just shouting into the void. Invisibility.
totally. And the notes, they get that. They validate how much that can sting. It's disheartening. But they also offer a really important reframe. Silence doesn't automatically mean people hate it, or that it's bad, or that it failed.
Okay, so what else could it mean?
Well, people are just swamped. Information overload, right? They're busy, distracted. Maybe the algorithm just didn't show it to many people. That happens all the time. And also, crucially, some people might genuinely admire it quietly. They see it, they like it, they just don't engage publicly.
So the creator's job, when faced with silence, isn't necessarily to scream louder or change everything.
Not necessarily, no. The source suggests it's more about recommitting to your path, your reasons for creating. Your journey is unique, and honestly, not every part of it is going to be met with a standing ovation. Sometimes the most important thing is just to keep going, keep making, even when it feels quiet out there.
All right, let's look at the complete opposite end of the spectrum now, the dream scenario, maybe. What do these notes say about managing virality, sudden fame?
Yeah, going viral often sounds like the ultimate win, right?
Yeah.
But the source points out it brings its own pretty intense set of challenges. That sudden, massive spotlight, it can be incredibly overwhelming.
How so?
Well, there's immense pressure to repeat it, to somehow top that viral hit, which is often impossible and can totally stifle your creativity. And think about it. While you get way more positive attention, you also open yourself up to exponentially more negative feedback and scrutiny just because the audience is suddenly huge.
And the notes draw a really sharp line here, cutting through the hype. Virality does not equal value. Fame does not equal worth.
That is such a critical point. Absolutely essential. The source kind of contrasts those fleeting viral moments with creators who build more slowly, more sustainably. The ones who connect with people gradually, piece by piece. They often end up with more genuine communities and, frankly, more resilient creative lives. It really pushes you to ask that question posed in the material. What do you actually want? Connection. Or just attention? Because they're not the same.
That's a really clarifying question to ask yourself. So, okay, with all this swirling around, the praise, the criticism, the silence, the sudden attention, how does a creator actually find that balance, between expressing what's true for them and dealing with how the world takes it?
The core advice here, and the source really emphasizes this, is to focus like a laser on what you can actually control. You can't control how someone interprets your work or if they even see it or if they comment. Zero control there. But you can control your mindset going in. You can manage your own expectations. You can set boundaries around how much you engage with feedback or when you check stats or how you protect your creative time and energy.
So it's less like putting on a performance where you need a certain reaction.
Yeah, exactly. And more like maybe starting a conversation. The notes suggest thinking about it that way. Share because you feel moved to share, because you want to connect, or offer a perspective. And then you practice letting go of needing a specific reply. That's where resilience comes in. Creative resilience, in this sense, is the freedom to make stuff just because you want to, without needing anyone's permission or applause to feel like it was worthwhile.
Okay, but when feedback does come in, positive or negative, how do you figure out what's actually useful versus what's just background noise? The source gives some clear pointers on spotting good feedback.
Yeah, it does. Good feedback, according to these notes, generally comes from a place of respect. Even if it's critical, it focuses on the work itself, not on you personally. It offers specific observations, things you can actually think about or act on. Ideally, it gives you a new perspective you hadn't considered, and often it kind of resonates with what you were trying to achieve anyway, even if it points out where you feel short.
And bad feedback, the stuff to maybe disregard.
That tends to be, vague or overly emotional, maybe just plain rude or feels like a personal attack. Often, honestly, it says more about where the commenter is coming from, their own stuff, than it does about your work. And it usually lacks that basic respect for the effort involved in creating anything. The source sums it up really well. Feedback isn't useful just because it's loud.
That is definitely one to remember. So after navigating all this, the good, the bad, the silent, the overwhelming, what does the source suggest for those times when the reaction just really gets under your skin? When it feels like too much or not enough or it just plain hurts?
Yeah, when it lands hard, the notes offer some really practical kind of grounding steps. First off, name the feeling, acknowledge it. Are you hurt, disappointed, confused, angry? Just let yourself feel it for a minute. Don't just stuff it down.
Okay. Step 1, acknowledge.
Step 2, step away. Seriously. Take a break from social media, maybe put the project aside for a bit, just rest, create some
Give
distance.
yourself space. Makes sense.
Yep. Then try to recenter. Go back to your why. Why did you start making this stuff in the first place? What intrinsically motivates you before any audience showed up? Reconnect with that core purpose. Talking to other creators could be huge too. Building that support network with people who actually get it, who understand the specific highs and lows of putting yourself out there creatively.
Yeah, community helps.
Definitely. And then finally, maybe the most powerful step, create again. Just get back to the process. Make something else. Reclaim that rhythm, that internal drive.
And the source ends that section with a really powerful reminder, doesn't it? It basically says, you are more than your metrics, more than your reviews. At the end of the day, you're someone who was brave enough to make something and share it.
Exactly. The act of sharing, of putting it out there, that's a success in itself, regardless of what comes back.
So if we zoom out and pull all these threads together, the big overarching idea from the source material seems to be that the audience, their reactions, it's kind of like a mirror held up to your work.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
It can reflect back how your message landed, maybe show you perspectives you didn't see, or even teach you things about the world you're creating in.
But the real trick, the skill that this material is trying to help you develop, is knowing when to really look in that mirror, when to listen carefully, learn from the feedback, and when to, turn away from the reflection and trust your own internal compass, your own voice, to decide where to go next.
Because ultimately, that's where the real direction has to come from inside you.
Keep creating. Keep listening to your own compass. Even when the applause is gone, the silence loud, or the noise too thick, you're still the one climbing the hill.